Charge Live Australia. You having a lovely day? There's so many of you. Robert and I were just in the room upstairs. We were going, we didn't think people were going to come. We weren't sure. It's always a nice surprise when we do these first-year shows in a new region when people show up. So thank you. We appreciate that. I'm really looking forward to this particular session because this is an easy one. Often I have to kind of think of really complex questions to ask extremely complex individuals, but it's just Robert. This one. Absolutely, I'm being mean. Incidentally, on the walk over here, he said, you know, it's just going to be 4 old Red Dwarf fans coming to this. We're going to mostly talk about Fully Charged, but then, at the end, I'm going to throw around the talking cube and I will indulge a few questions from the Red Dwarf fans. A little bit of Scrapheap action, it would be rude not to, wouldn't it? First things first, would you join me in giving a very, very big round of applause to the godfather of EVs, Robert Llewellyn.
Very kind, thank you.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
How are you today?
Knackered. No, I'm fine. It's been really amazing. This has been an extraordinary... we worked for a long time, as I'm sure you're very aware. It's been a long time in the planning to come to Australia. There was many times when we thought it was never going to happen. So it's so rewarding that you've all come and seen this. It's been an incredible success. We had amazing crowds here yesterday. If you weren't here yesterday, it was mind-boggling. Yeah, we didn't expect it. Well, we hoped for it, and it was a great success. So next year will be bigger and better. That's all I can say.
This show is especially close to your heart. You have Aussie ties. You have personal connections with this land.
I do. Yes, I've been married to an Australian for a long time. We've lived together for 35 years. When our children were, I think, 10 and 7. They said, we want you to get married. My son said, I want you to get married so I'm no longer a bastard. I'm only going to say that because his mother has a slightly different attitude to polite language than his British father. And we had to do a lot of talk when they were young. I've got to tell you one very quick anecdote about my children because they're lovely. We talked about appropriate use of bad language when my mother-in-law, who is a very strict Catholic Australian from Brisbane, came to visit, and I said, look, when Grandma's here, don't say the bad words that we don't sometimes laugh about in the kitchen, just try and be good. And they went, okay, Dad. So morning 1, I get up, and they've already got up. They've made Grandma a cup of tea, didn't look very drinkable. They burnt some toast for her. She was very happy. She was sitting there, no one swearing. It was fun. We had chats about what they were doing at school, about Grandma. It was all lovely, no swearing, it was great. Then we were laughing, and then we heard thump, 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 thump. Steps coming down the stairs from upstairs, into the room comes my Australian wife, hair all over her face. What the fuck's all this noise about? And it was the look, I will never forget that look that my children gave me that morning, which was... They tried, they did their best.
Louis Robertson is one of our many very, very talented videographers at Fully Charged who I work with very closely. I can confirm, in terms of language and demeanour, takes after his mother. We do have to quickly acknowledge just how unprecedented the attendance at this show is. We're not just saying this to be nice, we're not just saying this because we say this at every show. This is by far the most successful and the most popular first year in a new region live show we have ever done. We are bowled over by the attendance. The electric stuff is so new in this part of the world. It speaks to just the fact that you guys are starving for this technology. So we're hoping to bring it back bigger and better with lots more car brands next year. That's always a little bit of an annoyance with us on first year shows, isn't it, Robert? Some of the car brands are a little bit hard to get year 1. Year 2, very easy. We show them the footage of year 1. We go, hey, Mark, look. It's good than you.
Well, also, what we know now, and we didn't know the very first year we did it in the UK, we couldn't get anyone to come along. They didn't know what we were doing. They didn't understand why we were doing it, and it was really hard. I think we had one car brand who actually turned up with a couple of cars. We got a lot of people to bring their own cars. The Tesla Owners Club were amazing. They were driving people around slightly too fast on very speed-restricted roads. Another very brief anecdote. We had a radio call from one of the... we were at Silverstone. motor racing circuit. But the service roads around Silverstone, there's a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit because there's people walking around, there's cars, there's all sorts of stuff going on. It's not a racing circuit. And that was the road that the Tesla Owners Club were using. We got this call. I've just seen, let's see if I get the quote right, when we heard it, I've just seen a Model X go past at 105 miles an hour, full of screaming children. Can you ask them to slow down?
Yeah, we're all there at the show like, why is everyone arriving with their hair stood on end? What's going on in the shuttle process?
It was, but that year, what we didn't know was all the car manufacturers came to the show. They bought tickets. They didn't tell us. We didn't know. And the following year, they all brought cars, and we had test drives, and that's when it really kicked off. So it takes a year to convince people there is some interest in this area. You know, you've got to remember that a lot of the traditional car brands have spent their entire careers, the people who work in them, building combustion engine cars and selling combustion engine. That's their business. And then there's these weird people that want ones with electric car. Why do they want them? Are you sure? Is there any demand for it? Yes, there is.
and without being too sassy, I think it'll be fair to say that when you look at the car brands who do come and join us on year one, and it is the same ones around the world, you do get a sense of who is taking this seriously and who is taking their time. It's not a coincidence that it is the BYDs and the MGs and the Polestars that are here with us today, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And it is interesting then when the bigger brands do come along, or the older brands, or it's not bigger, it's the more established brands. When they do come along, they are completely bamboozled by the level of interest. So one of the great things at Farnborough last year was the competition between the different automotive firms who all had big stands outside and test drives as to who but who had all their test drives booked first. And I think Hyundai won last year, but they were so proud, and they were going around telling everyone from BMW and Audi and Ford. We were completely full up by 9:15, and the show didn't open till 10.
All right, enough live show talk. Let's talk about you. So you're obviously very well known for a bunch of work that you've done on the TV. Red Dwarf was one of your breakout hits, as it were, but you also did a bunch of really interesting shows around sort of engineering, and you, much like myself, do have a penchant for the oily bits. We like mechanical stuff. We like things that are beautifully and innovatively built. Where does the sustainability passion come from? Because one of the things I really love about working for you in this brand is he's not pretending, right? This is not a chap who's seeing that sustainability is like an on-trend topic at the moment, going, oh, we could capitalise on that. This man bleeds green. So I'm interested to know where that comes from, or where you think that comes from.
I mean, I think it's you know, and I can see one or two people of a similar generation here. They're sort of young people, but there was an ethos in the late 60s and 70s of, you know, alternative societies, of less pollute, and it was all to do with pollution. Then we talked about polluting rivers, and there's pollution in the sea, and then when people wanted to find a different way of doing it, and in a way it was very, very airy-fairy and not very grounded in reality, you know. And I worked in a city of Oxford with a group of people who made rickshaws because we wanted to decarbonise transport. And I'm talking like 1972, 73. I was a teenager and I was helping weld rickshaws together. And I'm not going to lie, they were shit. They were terrible things. They were very unstable, but and eventually we had two Indian engineers who came from India on some scheme in Oxford to do with the university, who came and showed us how to make rickshaws, which was a great transfer of skills. It came the other way around, which was really good. So there was always that interest in my background in how you make things. I lived on a commune, a proper, full-blown hippie mad commune, and I'm not the father of any children, but because I was thankfully too young to participate, but there was a lot of interbreeding. Let's leave it there. The kids all knew who their parents were, but the parents weren't sure, I think.
I could swear I just asked them a question about sustainability 2 minutes ago. Interbreeding hippies very quickly there, didn't we, Robert?
There is a link, because that old farm had never had electricity. It was a very old building outside Bilthwells in the Black Mountains in Wales. And the people there, two of them were engineering graduates from Oxford University, and they built what you can crudely describe as a wind turbine. And it was a wooden tower with a really homemade, very like Scrapheap Challenge, a home-built wind turbine on the top of it. And because I was young and wasn't scared of heights, they used to send me up to grease the bearings that were, because it made so much noise. It was incredibly loud. If the wind changed direction and it turned at a big wing on a big fan at the back to turn it into the wind, that noise of it turning woke everyone up in the house. Yeah! As it moved around. So I had to go up and put grease on that. But so that was my early involvement in the wind industry. But those guys then went on to work. I think one of them I know worked for Dong Energy, which then became Ørsted, which is the biggest wind turbine people in the world, a Danish company that putting all the big turbines out at sea. So there was those sort of things, but they were so crude at that time that it didn't really seem like a plausible alternative. And that's been a fascinating thing to watch, that progression in the last 20 or 30 years.
Absolutely. Just very quickly, AV team, we've got a very low level music on the speaker here. Can you just turn that down for me? Thank you. So I wish that some of the CEOs of these various car brands had the foresight that you had as far as how big electrification was going to be, because you started the Fully Charged channel some 11 years ago?
13.
13 years ago, when the sort of electric options or sustainable options were sort of a Nissan Leaf, walking,
not even,
right?
Barely Nissan Leaf, iMeave, and Tesla Roadster. Really, it was probably all you could actually get that were fully electric. There may have been a couple of others around the world.
So can you tell us a little bit about the very, very early days of Fully Charged? This was really sort of just a passion project that you did when you had the time to do it, right?
Yeah, so I mean, some of you will know of Scrapheap Challenge, but for those of you who don't, it was an engineering challenge show where two teams had to build something out of rubbish they found on a scrapyard. And it was very successful. We did it for 10 years, but for 4 of those years, we made the series in California. So the British teams would go to California and do the challenges there, because we had far more places we could test them in amazing locations. And we also made an American version, which was called Junkyard Wars. In Britain, it's a challenge. In America, it's a war. I got paid quite a lot of money for saying that, and I feel slightly dirty because of it. For the promotion.
The actual tagline.
It was, and there was also at last there's some decent trash on TV. That was one of the other ones. That was the poster. So there was a poster on Sunset Boulevard, in America, and in the very tiny corner, if you look closely, you could just about see me. So I have been on a poster on Sunset Boulevard next to Brad Pitt. That's the way I see it. But it was a key thing for me, because obviously I loved the show and doing it, and the engineering, and the engineers I met were amazing. But in America in particular, I met all these engineers that were working on battery packaging, battery management systems, electric drivetrains, and none of it made any sense, because this is 2001, 2002, 2003. It was forklift trucks, it was disability vehicles, it wasn't cars. And it didn't make sense. And then I got a lift in a Prius, which we hadn't got in the UK by then. And when it pulled away from some lights, I said to the woman driving, I said, "Oh my God, how's that?" It felt like it'd been pulled by a wire, by something else. It just didn't feel. It was weird. It was silent. And she said, "Oh, it's a hybrid." And she was very Californian. And so this is going to sound, it might sound rude, but it wasn't. I was an old man. I was old enough to be her dad. I said, "Oh, can when you drop me off at my place, can I pop your hood?" And it's completely polite to say that. So she opened the bonnet. I had a look at that, and I was amazed by what was in there. It was an amazing bit of technology to join an electric motor and a petrol engine. And why did they bother? And what's this all about? Gradually learned about, and it was very much to do with air quality in California and the legislation around air quality and the damage that they had by then had the data on that was doing to children and old people who lived near the big freeways, where there was millions of massive cars with massive engines sitting in traffic jams going hul, 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 hul. And that meant all that gas was coming out the back and people were breathing, and it was measurably bad for them, and that kind of made you then think, because I loved a V8. The first series I was there, sound engineer lent me for a week a fastback Mustang, 1969, bottle green, stunning, mint condition. One of those ones. I loved it. You had to pour extra testosterone in the tank to make it run. Fantastic. It was brilliant in a straight line, as long as there weren't any corners. And then it was utterly shit. It was amazing. But amazing car. So that was, a real passion to drive that. And you gradually go, okay, I think something needs to happen. And it took years, but it gradually sort of seeped into my life that there was maybe, we all needed to think about this technology we've all lived with, we've all grown up with.
100%. I, like yourself, kind of came into this as an enthusiast of cars and noisy stuff. And, and the more time I spend around you and around Dan, around the fully charged team, like, you can't help but become a climate change activist, because the more you learn about this stuff, the more outraged you become. It's impossible not to be. So I think everyone that works at this company kind of ends up being an angry hippie over the course of a few months, because we all bloody should be, right? On that subject, safe to say things have changed a little bit in 13 years since you started the channel. You used to cover hybrids because there weren't enough electric cars to talk about. Today we probably turn down, 4 out of 5 invites that we get to drive new things, because we just don't have the time, and there's so many. One of the real privileges of this job for me, and I'm sure for you as well, is that we get to meet some incredibly inspiring people who are genuinely contributing to helping save the world with the technology that they're putting together. Why don't you tell us about a few things that you've covered, or a few people that you've met in recent months or years for the Fully Charged show that you found especially inspiring?
Oh, blimey. Okay, well, I mean, I think one in the UK is a guy called Dale Vince, who is exactly what you just said. He's an angry hippie. He's an angry multi-millionaire hippie now. He's done quite well out of it. When I first met him, he literally lived in an old broken bus with it, and he had a dog on a string and a pile of kids, and he now lives in a castle. So he's done all right out of it. But he was his company, Ecotricity, put in electric car charges in every motorway services in the UK years, literally, if not decades before anyone else. And they weren't reliable. They often broke down. They drove you mad, but they were there. He did that first step, and they were free to use. And they were very popular when they did work, and extraordinarily unpopular when they didn't. And I just think it's worth, putting him in that history box of seeing that possible future. And they also installed hundreds of wind turbines. That's why his business is onshore wind. So that's where he made the money. It wasn't from the car, definitely wasn't from the car chargers. They lost millions with the car chargers. But they kind of opened that door, and what happened then was people were driving on a holiday or driving for work, and they'd see one of these chargers, and they'd see something, and it planted that seed right early on. And we're talking at least 10 years ago, they were first installing them. And we did a lot of stuff with Ecotricity in the early years. And I've known Dale a long time. He's an extraordinary man. He can be incredibly annoying. He can say the weirdest thing. I slightly like certain other very famous CEOs. He's done amazing things.
There is a whiff of English Musk about him, isn't there? He's quite mad, but a remarkable guy.
A remarkable guy. He should bring out an aftershave, a hippie aftershave with a bit of patchouli in it, called English Musk. I think it would sell very well. So he's one. I mean, the people who run, I'm not going to remember names, but the people who run GridServe, I wish I could, I will remember his name in a minute, but that's amazing what they're doing. So it's a really big charging network in the UK that use their own solar farms and wind farms to power their big charging hubs, where you arrive in the middle of the night and it's late and they're all lit, and there's 28 rapid chargers and there's staff that show you how to use it. And I think there's 4 or 5 of those open now. They're building hundreds of them. And that makes a total difference. When people go, I'm worried about range anxiety, well, stop there, have a cup of tea and shut up and fill your car and carry on. You don't need to worry about range anxiety, So those things are really exciting. And Musk as well, I did meet him once. I can do the entire conversation we had very quickly. Robert, this is Elon Musk. Oh, hello, really nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. That's it.
Incidentally, on the topic of range anxiety, Robert has a really good comeback for people who claim to need 500 miles of range in an electric car. He just goes, how big is your bladder? I suppose another thing that's changed dramatically over the time that you've been running this channel is public perception of this stuff, right? In the early days, you were literally on camera being like, no, it won't catch fire if you drive through a puddle, right? It can get to the end of your road. And that's changed a lot. People are much more receptive and much more interested in this technology. Do you feel that it's job done as far as convincing people that this is a winner, or are we in a bubble and must we remember that a lot of people still need convincing?
Yeah, we're definitely in a bubble. I think the bubble's got bigger. I think it was a little pinprick bubble for a long time. It's now a much bigger bubble, but there's still a lot of resistance to it. And I completely sympathise with it. I completely understand it, because it's, what combustion cars are, if nothing else, are normal. We've all grown up with them. We're all used to them. We know how to use them. We know what they do. We know how expensive they are to maintain. I do like to remind people of that they're not cheap to run. Once you buy them, you might be able to buy it cheaper, but boy, do you spend the money. You know, we can say that, my generation can say that from long and bitter experience. It's not theory. I've spent so much money fixing cars. I had a gearbox drop on my head when I was 21, so I know how difficult it is to, I mean, it wasn't quite that bad, but I was trying to replace a gearbox in an old car. They just fell to bits all the time. That's my memory of combustion cars. They just break down a lot. Whereas the electric cars I've had, I've maybe been very lucky, have been absolutely 100% faultless. I mean, they just go along. 100% has changed. But you're right, the perception I think is changing, and I think the more electric cars people see on the road, the more acceptable they become. They're not some weird esoteric fringe thing, they just become normal.
That's for sure. Still some work to do in warming people up, but for the most part, it's going in the right direction. On the subject of old cars not working properly, incidentally, I was having a chat with Chris at the Felton stand. They're the guys with the lovely old classics that have been converted to electric. He was telling me that demand for components for old Porsches has exploded in recent months because people are turning them electric. And when they turn them electric, they drive them way more. Because if you've got a lovely old car that runs on electric power, you're more inclined to take it out on the weekend because you're not thinking, well, what if it explodes on the way to the shop? You know, that's less likely to happen.
Mechanical range anxiety, I think, is something we all need to spread. Because that's what I used to have all the time. Oh my God! Oh my God! That happened a lot. And also the guy we interviewed, of course I can't remember his name, a lovely man who had a Ferrari, you'll know, red.
That is the correct name for that Ferrari. Was it Testarossa that he turned electric?
I think so, yes. And he did drive it every year. He'd take it out in the summer and he'd start it up, and it would break, and he'd have to take it in for a service, and he'd do it again and again. And then he changed it to electric, and he uses it every day. He goes down the supermarket, picks up his he just uses it as a car for the first time, and he's had it for like 35 years, where it was always breaking down and always costing a fortune to run, and now he just drives it whenever he wants to.
Yeah, go and watch that video of Robert driving the electric converted Ferrari if you've not seen it, because in the opening of that video, you floor it and make a noise that I've never heard you make before. So yeah, right up there.
And then also, they'd really turned it down. It had a Tesla ludicrous drive system installed into it, so it was a bit. And I went round. The embarrassing bit of that was, I did a loop where we were filming from the road, and you go past again and again to get some footage of that. And I went round a roundabout that was very near a primary school at school rush time. And so I was really being careful. There was everyone in cars, of course. No kids walking these days. They're all in the back of SUVs. But I went round the car. There was lots of people waiting, and I went round the roundabout to do that. And it's so frisky. So you're on a roundabout in a red Ferrari, old bald man, and you're going around as slowly as you can. And I just missed pressing the throttle there, and cloud of burning rubber. And I just went, everybody, look at what a sad old kid. So embarrassing. I was trying so hard not to do that. It was very, very easy to do that in that car.
That's the problem with driving a red Ferrari.
Yeah.
When you do something like that, everyone goes, good. Right, I've got a few quick-fire questions for you. I thought that would be fun, and then we'll turn it over to the audience and take some of your questions. So, quick-fire questions, quick-fire answers, please.
Okay.
Favourite fully charged episode?
Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord.
Do you remember any?
Anything at all. Favourite?
Okay.
Wow. Oh, what? I can't think of anything. No, not one. It'll be one you did, Jack, because they're brilliant and annoying. So good.
You're very kind. Tell me about a car/piece of tech that gave you a proper oh my god moment the first time you saw it.
I think it's got to be a Tesla, I'm afraid. You know, when they first came out, the first really high performance, the P100D, when I drove that. I think there's footage of that on the show when it got a bit sweary. Just to be in a vehicle, I think I had been in a vehicle on a track that could accelerate that fast, but I wasn't driving it. But that was terrifying. I mean, that is, when you go to sub 3 second 0 to 60, 0 to 100k, you know, it is quite unpleasant. I wouldn't want a car like that. It made me feel nauseous and dizzy. I couldn't see properly. My vision went. I just was swearing too much. Terrifying. So, but I mean, incredible. The fact that existed, that vehicle existed, and to buy an equivalent car like that with a combustion engine was like £1.5 million. And this one was a ludicrously expensive car, but so much cheaper. You know, that was, I think, a moment where you go, no, this technology is definitely, it's better. Yeah.
Do you remember we drove the original Tesla Roadster together the other day?
Yes.
That was quite good fun.
Yeah.
Quite cosy in there.
That was quite cosy. Imagine Jack in a Tesla Roadster. I could barely get in it myself.
Yeah. We touched each other in ways that we had no intention of doing.
We had no choice.
That didn't make the cut, thankfully. Tell me about a car / piece of tech that is on the horizon, coming soon, that you're really excited about.
I got to say, that I did see because I don't need a pickup truck. There's no need for me to have one. Well, no, I saw last year the Rivian. The Rivians were just beautifully put together. And I've got to say that I just think that I think it's a transitionary vehicle. But the Ford F-150, when you see it and you know what that car can do, and you know what that car represents in American culture, I think it's really, really exciting vehicle. I didn't drive it, I just sat in it. It's just massive. It's like getting in someone's house. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. Everything about it is daft. But there was a great little Twitter feed the other day from a guy, I think he was in Kentucky, and they'd had a power cut for 5 days, and he ran his house for 5 days off his bloody pickup truck. And I just think, when Americans hear that, they go, "I'm on that one." And they are selling them. They've just started remanufacturing. They had a bit of a pause. They've got so many orders, and I think it will just change people's attitudes to the technology. It's just better than I'm sure a lot of you must have seen that the official government Australian announcement where it's spelt wrong. Have you seen those shows? But the one about you can't, they're going to steal our Christmas holidays because you can't tow anything in an electric car. I don't know if you saw it. And there's footage of an electric car towing a boat, and then it tows I don't know what it was, a big trailer and a big caravan. And then I'm going to use I won't use the bad word, I'll just say F. And then the woman says, it can tow a car, it can tow a boat, it can tow an aeroplane. And there's footage of a Tesla Model X pulling an Airbus A380. That's quite big, and it's pulling it along a runway. They can tow. Shut up. And I think we're sort of moving on to that stage now.
Generally speaking, our favourite types of cars are kind of small and efficient and frugal and just enough, but no more, right? Yeah. That's what we really like.
Yes.
However, every now and then, you get in something like an F-150 Lightning, and you're like, yes! I was driving one in San Diego, I think I ran over an e-tron at one point. I didn't notice, it might have been a speed bump, I'm not sure. Well, let's finish with this, actually. This is not so much a quick-fire question. It's a bit deep and it's a bit profound. It's a bit difficult to answer. But you've been in this space forever, and you know more about it than most people. At this moment in time, do you feel hopeful and optimistic about the whole big climate changey thing? Do you think we're on track? Are we really starting to have to knock on doors and get people afraid? Do we really have to turn it up, or are you kind of thinking, yeah, this is going as it should be? We're in the right direction.
I think people doesn't work, and I think people will shut down and just ignore it. They'll say you're wrong, and it's But I think for example, last year we had 2 days in the United Kingdom where it was over 40 degrees centigrade. That has never happened in the history of temperatures. We've been keeping temperatures in the United Kingdom since 1503 fairly accurately, and since 1600 very accurately. And it's just never got anywhere near that. The fact that that's happened, and our infrastructure just literally wilted. Literally tower blocks were kind of going, trees are kind of, we're not used to that sort of temperature. So that is a clue. That might just be weather. I'm very happy to accept that, but it was also a sign of things to come, that we're having hotter and hotter summers in the UK and milder winters. This winter I've just missed being an exception. But I think I'm just hoping that people will adopt attitudes and technologies that are less damaging. And I think the fact that the economics of it are shifting, that people are going, oh, wait a minute, if I've got solar panels and a battery in my house and I run an electric car, it is cheaper. It is just simply, not for no other reason. Don't hug a tree, vote for Nigel Farage, do whatever you like. But pay less for your electricity and your heating and your cooling in your house and your driving, and that's an amazing change. And I think what I love is the fact that it does seem to it goes across political barriers, and I think that's really kind of why I like the F-150. My neighbour's arch Tory, absolute dyed-in-the-wool member of the Conservative Party, thinks Boris Johnson shouldn't be hung, one of the few people in the country that still thinks that. And he's got a Kia e-Niro, and he loves it. So I love him. Yeah, I worship him.
If you don't know who Nigel Farage is, just imagine a big slug in a tie. That's roughly accurate. You're so right. When we go to places like, always use Norway as an example, like when you go to Norway, for example, and absolutely everyone drives electric. I remember I interviewed people at chargers, and I said, why did you go electric? And I was expecting a real mix of answers. I was expecting people to say, well, all the beautiful nature in Oslo, we're passionate about sustainability, I don't want my children to be breathing these poisonous fumes. No, they're all just like, they're cheaper. The government made them cheaper, they took all the tax off them, they put all the tax on big polluted vehicles, they just made it make more sense to people to go electric. And once they're in those electric cars, they go, oh, this is fantastic. Because they are, right? Yeah. You're right, we don't need to scare people. We don't even really need to get them super excited about it. We just need to make it simple for them.
Yeah, I mean, my response now to people who go, you know, I love the whole idea of going electric, but it's just not ready yet. They're just not there yet. I go, it's fine. Stick with what you've got. Don't even think about it. Don't worry about it. Don't try an electric car. I know that the next car you get in 5 years or 10 years will be electric anyway. It doesn't matter. Have an opinion now that's strident. It's fine. It's not interesting.
Would you guys like to ask Robert some questions? Let's start with this gentleman over here. I'm going to chuck this cube at you. Hold it nice and close to your face when you speak, please, mate. There you go. Let's keep these nice and quick, please, guys. We'll try and get a few in.
Alright, first of all, Robert, I'd just like to say, when I was younger, I watched a lot of the Scrapheap Challenge, and it helps me understand a lot of, like, that, you know, scrap isn't just scrap. You can use it for many things, and, you know, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And I wanted to ask you if you remember any of the Scrapheap Challenge episodes.
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah. What was your favourite?
Oh, I think it has to be the flight special we did, I think in 2002, which was to commemorate the first flight by the Wright brothers in the United States. So we had 3 teams, American, French, British, who built aircraft, and we gave them 2 days, but they could only use traditional tools to do it. So they couldn't use grinders and welders and all that stuff. So they built them out of wood. It was the most peaceful build, because normally we had such a lot of noise on the set, grinders and welding and hammering metal and all that stuff, and it was wood planing and sewing wing material and ironing. I did the ironing, I helped do the ironing the wing material to get it taut. And we went out in the desert, the American, I'll shorten it right down, but the American one did an amazing job of going incredibly fast, and it was really good aerodynamic design for keeping a vehicle on the ground. It just ground itself. The faster they went, the heavier they went. They got up to 85 miles an hour, so well over 100k, and they were digging huge ditches in the
could have driven upside down on a ceiling.
Yeah, if they could go upside down, they'd have flown easily. And they were so funny about it. It was great. And the French guy was a test pilot for fighter jets, so really experienced guy. And I had to interview him before, and his English wasn't terribly good, but I said he was sitting in basically a tea chest with wings and a bit of stuff out the back. It looked very, very crude. And I said, are you okay about flying? It's going to be the first time. I am shitting it. Such a good term. But we might have done, like, can you say that without using that word?
Oh, I am so sorry, I did not know. They told me to say shitting it.
And then I have just remembered I haven't checked, because whenever I mention him, I always want to check on Wikipedia if he's still with us. I'm pretty sure he is. Billy Brooks is a test pilot for hang gliders. So when you think of that, just think, hang glider test pilot. What does that mean? He jumps off a cliff with some aluminium and some canvas tied to his back to see if it works. That is what Billy Brooks does. And he was in the British plane, which was a little biplane, little engine on the front. They didn't have time to finish it. He was sitting on a children's deck chair that was taped to a piece of wood. No parachute or anything like that, because we didn't think it would work. And they didn't even have time to... He had a control lever, which was a broomstick with bits of string tied to it, to the control surfaces on the wings, and he had a piece of leather in his mouth tied to string tied to the throttle. That's how he controlled the engine speed. He said it was really difficult. For full throttle, he couldn't really see where he was going. Unbelievable. And he had to go along the thing, this bounce, and we weren't ready to film this. We had a spotter plane to film this. We weren't ready. It took off. And we went, oh my God, it's gone in the air. It's actually, is that flying? I think I did actually say, is that flying? And everybody went, yes, it is. Yeah. And the agreement we had with the Federal Aviation Authority was you couldn't go above 50 feet, which was a joke, as if they're going to go above. This is Scrapheap. They're not going to go above 50 feet. He went up, I don't know, he went up high. And I said, I don't know how you judge height here. And I said that next to the man from the Federal Aviation Authority, who just shook his head and sat in his pickup truck and was like this. And then we had the spotter plane took off, like a scrambling Spitfire in World War II. They ran and got in it. They went up and they could fly really slow. It's a big slow glider that they film. Like if you see film of geese flying along, that was in that stage. This is in 2002. That's how they would film them. And we had radio contact with them, but not with Billy Brooks. It was very happy apparently. So they were flying along. And we said, "Is he okay?" And they said, "Oh, he's smiling, sir." And they said, "Can you wave at him to come down?" "We are gesticulating in a downward motion, but he just waves back, sir." It's so dry. He's so dry. And then the director said, "Look, it's dangerous. It's not safe. We can't cover it for the." "Well, how high is he?" "We are currently at 3,500 feet, and he's still climbing." But he did land, and he did survive the day. But that was that was such a high point in Scrapheap because so many of the machines basically did something and then fell to bits. That one actually bloody worked. It was extraordinary. Anyway.
From hearing Robert tell a lot of Scrapheap stories, the most impressive thing about that show is no one died or did jail time.
No one died. Astonishing. Yes, sir. So close.
Robert, there was news from overnight from Red Dwarf. Have you got another career to worry about?
I was very, very surprised by that. So Red Dwarf's been going since 1987. It's been going quite a long time. I've been involved with it since 1988, so I'm still referred to as the new boy by Craig Charles.
What do you know? You're just a new kid.
And there has been a long ongoing, I really won't bore you with it, a legal dispute between the producers behind the scenes of Red Dwarf, who owns the rights, who owns the name, who owns all that stuff. It's really sad, got nothing to do with the cast or any of the people who actually make the show. That has been resolved. That's all I know, which means there's always been a lot of argument about whether we're going to make more. So it does mean we could make more. Whether we will, I have no idea. We're all a bit knackered, to be honest. Just very briefly, the last time we made a big series, 2016-17. What was it? No, it was 2019-20. So we just finished a special before that, and there was a genetically engineered life form that was chasing us down a corridor, and it was a young lad, a 22-year-old, in a very horrible, complex costume that was really heavy, and we were meant to appear and run past the camera, and he was chasing us. We've always been chased by genetically engineered life forms. The only problem was, as we were running towards the camera, he overtook us. It was a very timely reminder that we're all getting on a bit. We've been in space a long time, sir.
Daleks or just something slower moving.
Yeah, something slower moving. Yeah. So that was a little bit. So I don't know what we'll do, but I mean, what's interesting is I spoke to Doug when I was since I've been in Australia. Doug Naylor, who's the writer who writes all the scripts for it, and he's amazing. And he said, "Would you do it more?" And I went, "Well, look, I'll do more if the rest of them do it. It'd be wrong not to." And he said, "I've just spoken to all the other three, and they've all said exactly the same thing."
Let's have one or two more. I'm going to see if I can launch it. Here we go, sir. Oh, yes.
Oh, what a catch. Australians are better at catching than English people, let me tell you. That thing goes all over the shop in the UK.
Conversion kick outside after this.
Hi, Robert. In 2015, you produced a YouTube program, which, to my mind, is the best explanation of the efficiency between fossil fuel and electricity.
Yeah.
Do you remember it?
Is it the animated one?
If you haven't seen anything here, it's Robert is wearing glasses, goggles, safety goggles, white coat, with 6 pens in the pocket, and a cup, and he did a test between a fossil fuel lawnmower
That's right.
and an electric lawnmower.
Yeah.
He did explain the difference. He then set off, measured the amount of petrol, put it in the engine, and started mowing his lawn with the petrol engine.
Robert, do you recall this episode?
I do recall this episode, yeah. Yeah.
The petrol engine ran for 7 minutes on that fuel. He then got into the electric one, which had the same equivalent energy.
Yeah.
And he went on and on.
Couldn't be bothered to wait until it finished, yeah. No, it was an experiment that worked much better, and we consulted with actual scientists who were good at mathematics and engineering and understanding energy density. So we used exactly the amount of energy that was stored in the 600 watt-hour batteries in the lawnmower, and it's nothing. It's like it's a couple of teaspoons of gasoline, of petrol, and it doesn't last very long in a mower. So, and we did the experiment very honestly. I made my old petrol mower run out, and I kept trying to start it so the tank was absolutely empty, and then we added this tiny amount of petrol, and it lasted 7 minutes, it was very good, very noisy, a lot of smoke coming out, but it did work. And then the electric mower we got just went on and on and on. I mean, for that, so that just was an example of the difference, it's a very difficult to do equivalence between a liquid fuel you burn and an energy stored in a battery, but if you can get close to it, you realise the electrons are a bit better.
Not actually that hard to demonstrate, is it? You just show it, and it look way more efficient.
Yeah,
it works.
Yeah.
Very quickly, please.
Thank you. No, glad you enjoyed that.
Question. Have you mowed the lawn since?
You see the one he did in Oz with the lawnmower? It's the most chaotic thing I've seen. It's a pure anarchy.
It was a bit unnecessarily difficult to steer, that thing, but it was amazing. Yeah. Yes, I have mowed the lawn since, but not probably enough. But we've got some chickens, so they keep some of it down low. It's quite good.
Let's have one more. Go on.
So, just very quickly, I heard you speak at a pub about 10 years ago in Westminster about electric cars.
Oh, wow.
It was fantastic, and I said then, I just sold my petrol car, my next car will be electric. I bought my next car last year, which is a Polestar, and I've named it Starbug after you. I want to know how many people, if you had to guess, you reckon you are responsible for getting into electric vehicles?
Oh God, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I do meet people who often say that, but I'm sure there's some other reasons why they've done it as well. But I mean, no, that's very kind of you to say that, to tell that story. That's great. Yeah. I used to do a talk called "Electric Cars Are Rubbish, Aren't They?" all in one sentence. And that was a good sense of how slowly attitudes were changing, because I eventually changed it to "Electric cars are rubbish, full stop. Aren't they? Question mark. So it was a slightly different approach to it. And you saw one of the very early ones. Yeah, that was extraordinary. Okay. Yeah.
It's a nice try, but you will never ever successfully get this chap to acknowledge the immense impacts that he has had on this industry. And that brings me to... What I would love to do now is some small prepared speech where we acknowledge the contribution that Robert has made, where we acknowledge the fact that none of us would be here today if it weren't for him, that he may single-handedly be second only to Elon as far as contribution to this space, but he'd hate that. So on behalf of all of us here, what I'm simply going to say, Robert, is thank you. We're going to get a selfie, guys. Give us your biggest grins. This is one of the most busy sessions. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Thank you for making this weekend absolutely wonderful. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you later. Cheers.